Tico's looking cool, right? Look at that. Sunglasses in the dark. Gotta love it. And we got Mr. Haniel back there.
Hi.
It's Monday morning. I was reading Old Testament, and one of the things I was reading is in Genesis chapter 32, and it was an interesting story. It said Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled him until daybreak. It's not really referring to a man, it's actually referring to God. And it's kind of interesting because it says, then he said to Jacob, "Let me go." And Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And it's an interesting story because it says that then he struck Jacob's hip and dislocated his hip, and it's like a very confusing story, but there's something behind it, and it ends up in this story with God changing his name and saying, "You're no longer going to be called Jacob. You've wrestled with men, you've wrestled with God. Your name is going to be Israel." Well, here's the thing. Jacob was this guy who had fought his whole life with everybody, and the reason I share this story is because God's the one. He was left alone, and God came to him, and he still wrestled with God. Perhaps in your life, it seems like it's been the same thing. As we go into 2020 and we go into, and leaving behind 2019, and you think back on between 2011 and 2019, you're like, has your whole life been a struggle? Is it possible that you yourself create fights with everybody around you, even God? And God's the one that's been trying to run you down and bless you, and he's got to dislocate your hip like he had to do with this guy to get him to slow down and say, just stay there still long enough for me to bless you. God has a way of slowing us down. Sometimes if we're too busy, with too many distractions, he can remove those distractions. If we just have no time, he could get us sick so we're in bed and have nothing to do but think about him. But sometimes we're trying to do so much with our own strength, and God might be trying to bless us. Have you ever thought about that? God might be trying to bless you, and you're so busy working so hard and fighting with everybody because you've convinced yourself that life is a challenge, and if it's gonna be, it's up to me. That's right. If it's gonna be, it's up to me. And God's like, I could help. And maybe you're thinking, but I've prayed. Really? How have you prayed? The way a 2-year-old asks for things in Toys R Us? He passes by the superheroes. I want one of those. And then you ignore him, and then a second later he forgets about the superheroes, and then he passes by the balls. I want one of those. And then 2 seconds later he forgets about that if you don't give it any attention. And then he mentions, oh, I want the silly putty. Those aren't really wants. They're just impulses that he sees, and God's like, if you only pray for something once in your life, they're just impulses. So sometimes people say, no, I've prayed for stuff, and I'm like, have you really prayed for stuff? I've been counting on God. Have you really been counting on God, or have you really been counting on yourself? God might be trying to bless your life, but you might have convinced yourself. And you could blow me off, or you can meditate on what I'm trying to say a little bit deeper and ask yourself, does your life seem to repeat itself over and over and over again? Do you find yourself at one season in your life fighting with a particular partner, and then 5 years later or 5 months later, you're fighting with another partner and it's the same fights? Could it be that you're just trying to fight with everybody in life because you've convinced yourself that life is always a struggle, and God's been trying to bless you? Stop fighting. God's not trying to fight with you. God's trying to fight with you. So invite him to work with God, not against God, and not against this world, and not against this universe, and not against everybody. The whole universe is not against you. Quite the contrary. God might be trying to make everything work for your behalf. Romans 8:28. For he makes all things work for the good of those he loves, and those that are called according to his purpose. Give that some thought, okay? God bless you. Please take the time to share these messages. There's somebody out there that needs to hear it even more than you. Together we can make a difference. God bless you, one and all.